The warning lights on Captain Jake Morrison's ship flashed red across the control room. He stared at the readings on his screen and rubbed his tired eyes. After 6 months of deep space exploration, nothing should surprise him anymore. But these energy readings were impossible. "Lisa, are you seeing this?" Jake called to his navigator. Lisa Chang looked up from her station, her dark hair falling across her face. She had been tracking their position near the edge of known space for the past 3 hours. "The sensors are picking up something big, Captain. Really big." Pete Jackson crawled out from under the engine console, grease stains covering his uniform. As the ship's engineer, he knew every sound the New Horizon made. But for the last hour, the engines had been humming in a way that made him nervous. "Whatever it is out there, it's messing with our systems," he said. Wiping his hands on a dirty cloth, Jake stood up and walked to the main viewing screen. Space looked empty, just like it always did. But his instruments told a different story. Something massive was floating in the darkness ahead of them. Something that shouldn't exist. "Amy, get up here." Jake spoke into the ship's communication system. "We need you to look at something." Dr. Amy Foster arrived on the bridge within minutes. She was the team's expert on alien languages and cultures. Her job was to study anything they found that might have been made by other species. She carried a small computer tablet that contained every known alien language in the galaxy. "What do you have for me?" Amy asked, pushing her glasses up her nose. Lisa pointed to her screen. "We found an object about 2 kilometers ahead. It's giving off energy, but it's not like anything in our databases." Amy looked at the readings and frowned. "This looks like precursor technology, but that's impossible. The precursors died out thousands of years ago." Jake had heard stories about the precursors. They were an ancient race that had built amazing technology before disappearing from the galaxy. Most scientists thought they were just legends, but here was proof that they had been real. "Can we get closer?" Jake asked Pete. The engineer checked his instruments. "The engines are running fine, but something is pulling at the ship. It's like the object wants us to come closer." Jake made his decision. "Take us in, but slowly. I want to know what we're dealing with before we get too close." The New Horizon moved forward through space. As they got closer, the object became visible on their screen. It was huge, bigger than their entire ship. It looked like a metal sphere covered in strange symbols that glowed with blue light. "Amy, can you read those symbols?" Jake asked. Amy stared at the screen, typing quickly on her tablet. "I'm running them through every language program we have. Wait, I'm getting something. It's old, really old. The computer says it's a warning." "Message? What kind of warning?" Jake asked. Amy's face went pale as she read the translation. "It says, 'Beware the sleeping guardians of the third world. They slumber by choice, not by defeat. Do not wake what chose to sleep, for their awakening will change everything.'" Pete stopped working on his console. "Third world? What does that mean?" Lisa checked her star charts. In the old galactic navigation system, Earth was listed as the 3rd planet from its star, but Earth is primitive. They barely have space travel. Jake felt a chill run down his back. "Are you saying this message is about humans?" Amy kept reading from her tablet. "There's more. It says the Guardians once ruled the stars, but chose to sleep so others could grow. It warns that they have weapons and knowledge beyond understanding. The message ends with, 'They are not gone, only waiting.'" Meanwhile, on the other side of the galaxy, Commander Ryan Blake was having his own problems. His mining team had been working on the frontier world of Kepler 442b for 6 months. They were supposed to dig up rare metals and ship them back to the colonies. It was boring work, but it paid well. Everything changed when they broke through into the underground chamber. "Commander, you need to see this," called his lead miner, Tony Rodriguez. The man's voice shook with excitement and fear. Ryan climbed Down into the hole his team had dug. Electric lights lit up a room that was clearly not natural. The walls were smooth and covered with the same kind of symbols that Jake's team had found on the precursor object, but it was the paintings on the walls that made Ryan's blood run cold. The paintings showed different alien species that Ryan recognized. There were Zephyrians with their blue skin and 4 arms. There were crystalline beings that looked like living gems. There were dozens of other species that made up the Galactic Council, and standing with them, clearly in charge, were humans. Humans in the paintings wore advanced armor and carried weapons that glowed with energy. They stood in front of massive spaceships that dwarfed anything in the current galactic fleet. Other species bowed to them or stood beside them as equals, but never above them. "Get me a communication link to the Galactic Council," Ryan ordered. "They need to know about this." His communication officer, Sarah Kim, tried to establish contact. "Sir, I'm getting interference. Something is blocking our signals." Ryan looked around the chamber again. In one corner, a small device was glowing with the same blue light they had seen in the symbols. As he watched, the light grew brighter. Back on the new horizon, Jake's team was dealing with their own problems. The precursor object had started to move, rotating slowly in space. The symbols on its surface pulsed with increasing speed. "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," Lisa reported. "But it's not coming from the object. It's coming from the direction of Earth." Jake felt his heart skip a beat. "Earth? That's impossible. Earth doesn't have the technology to send signals this far." Amy was working frantically on her translation programs. "The signal is in the same language as the warning message. It's some kind of automated response. The object must have sent a signal to Earth when we approached it." Pete's engine suddenly roared to life without his input. "Captain, we're moving. The ship is flying itself." The new horizon began to accelerate toward the inner galaxy. Toward Earth, Jake tried to take control, but the ship's computer wouldn't respond to his commands. "Amy, what's happening?" Jake demanded. Amy's face was white with fear as she read. "The new message, the signal from Earth. It's not a response. It's a wake-up call. The message says, Guardian Protocol activated. Custodian vessels report for duty. The long sleep ends now." On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was working late in her laboratory in Antarctica. She had been studying meteorite fragments that had crashed near the research station 3 days ago. The fragments were unlike anything she had ever seen. They contained metals that shouldn't exist and gave off a strange energy that made her instruments act strangely. As she worked, Elena began to feel dizzy. The room seemed to spin around her, and she heard voices in her head, speaking in languages she didn't recognize. She tried to stand up, but her legs wouldn't support her. The meteorite fragments on her desk began to glow with the same blue light that Jake's team had seen. The glow grew brighter and brighter until it filled the entire room. Elena fell to her knees as images flooded her mind. She saw spaceships bigger than cities flying between the stars. She saw humans in advanced armor standing on the bridges of those ships, commanding fleets that stretched across the galaxy. She saw alien species bowing before human leaders, not in defeat, but in respect. And then she saw the choice. The humans had chosen to give up their power. They had chosen to sleep, to let other species grow and learn without their interference. But they had also built safeguards, systems that would wake them if they were ever needed again. The fragments on her desk cracked open, revealing small devices that projected holographic images into the air. The images showed star maps, weapon designs, and most importantly, locations of sleeping human installations all over Earth. Elena realized with growing horror that humanity had never been primitive. They had been pretending to be primitive, and now something had triggered their awakening. Around the world, similar fragments began to activate. In government bunkers, in the depths of the ocean, In secret facilities that no one knew existed, ancient human technology came to life after centuries of sleep. The universe had one rule: don't wake the humans. Someone had just broken that rule. Lieutenant Commander Zekta stared at the star map in front of him. The blue light from the screen made his forearms look ghostly in the dark command room of his scout ship. He had been a Zephyrian military officer for 15 years, but he had never been given orders like these before. "Are you sure about this, Commander?" asked his pilot, Sub-Lieutenant Vexiini. Her voice was nervous. "The High Council has forbidden any ship from entering the Sol system for over 300 years. Zekta turned to look at his crew. They were all young like him. They had grown up hearing stories about the mysterious ban on the Sol system, but none of them understood why. The humans there were primitive. They had barely developed space travel. What could be dangerous about them? "General Vextar's orders are clear," Zekta said. "We scout the system, gather information about human technology, and report back. The General believes the old warnings are just stories told to keep us away from valuable territory." The ship's navigator, Officer Kreltan, looked up from his station. "Sir, I'm detecting some unusual readings as we approach the system boundary. There seems to be some kind of energy field around the entire solar system." Zekta walked over to look at the readings. "Is it a defensive barrier?" "I don't think so, sir. It's more like a sensor network. Very advanced, but it doesn't seem hostile." Zekta made his decision. "Take us in, but slowly. Stay ready to jump to hyperspace if anything goes wrong." The Zephyrian scout ship crossed into the Sol system. At first, nothing happened. The ship moved past the outer planets without any problems. Zekta began to think that General Vextar was right. The humans were no threat. Then the asteroid started moving. "Sir," Krelton's voice was high with panic. "The asteroid belt is rearranging itself. Rocks are moving into formation around us." On the main screen, Zekta watched in horror as thousands of asteroids began to form a perfect sphere around his ship. But these weren't natural asteroids. As he looked closer, he could see that they were covered in metal plating and weapon systems that had been hidden under layers of rock and dust. "Get us out of here," Zekta ordered. Vexiini tried to engage the hyperspace drive, but nothing happened. "Sir, something is blocking our jump engines. We're trapped." A new voice came over the ship's communication system. It spoke in perfect Zephyrian, but the accent was strange. "Zephyrian vessel, you have violated the Sol system boundary. Please remain calm while we determine your intentions." Zekta grabbed the communication device. "This is Lieutenant Commander Zekta of the Zephyrian Imperial Navy. By what authority do you detain us?" "By the authority of the Solar Defense Grid, activated by Precursor Protocol 7. You have 30 minutes to explain your presence here before defensive measures are taken." On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was no longer alone in her laboratory. The small room was now filled with holographic displays that showed star maps, ship movements, and most importantly, the location of every alien vessel within 50 light years. Of Earth. She was not the same person she had been 3 days ago. The awakening process had changed her mind, filling it with knowledge and memories that belonged to humanity's forgotten past. She now understood that she was part of an ancient network of guardians who had been sleeping for centuries. "Ben, you need to see this," she called to her assistant, Ben Carter, who had been working in the next room when the awakening began. Ben walked in, but he moved differently now. His eyes glowed with a faint blue light, and when he spoke, his voice carried an authority that hadn't been there before. "I see it, Elena. The Zephyrians have broken the boundary. The question is what we do about it." Elena looked at the holographic display showing the trapped scout ship. "The automated systems are holding them, but this is just the beginning. If one ship made it through, others will follow." Meanwhile, across the Earth, other humans were experiencing their own transformations. In New York City, construction worker Tony Richards was trying to fix a broken elevator when something strange happened. He touched the control panel, and suddenly he could feel the building's entire electrical system in his mind. Every wire, every circuit, every computer was like an extension of his own body. What the hell? Tony muttered, pulling his hand back from the panel. But the connection remained. He could still feel the building's systems, and more than that, he could control them. In a hospital in Chicago, Nurse Helen Brooks was treating a patient who had been in a terrible car accident. The man was dying, and there was nothing the doctors could do. Helen put her hands on his chest to comfort him, and suddenly she felt energy flowing from her body into his. The man's wounds began to heal right before her eyes. Helen stared at her hands in shock. They were glowing with the same blue light that had been appearing all over the world. In a small town in Texas, high school teacher Gary Coleman was trying to calm down his students after strange lights had appeared in the sky. When a scared student started speaking in what sounded like gibberish, Gary found that he could understand every word. The student was speaking in an alien language that Gary had never heard before, but somehow he knew exactly what it meant. All over Earth, humans were changing. Not all of them, but enough. The awakening was selective, choosing people who had the right genetic markers. People whose ancestors had been part of the original Guardian network. Back in space, Colonel Alex Thompson was dealing with the biggest crisis of his military career. As the commanding officer of Earth's newly formed Space Defense Command, he had been preparing for the possibility of alien contact for years. But he had never expected it to happen like this. "Sir, we have confirmation," reported his intelligence officer Maria Santos. "There's a Zephyrian scout ship trapped in the asteroid belt. Our automated systems activated and caught them." Alex looked at the tactical display on his screen. The asteroid belt didn't look like an asteroid belt anymore. It looked like a massive space fortress with weapon platforms and defensive systems that had been hidden for centuries. "How long have those systems been there?" Alex asked. "Unknown, sir. But based on the technology readings, they're far more advanced than anything we currently have in our fleet." Lieutenant Dan Walsh, Alex's tactical officer, looked up from his station. "Sir, we're receiving more reports from around the system. There are hidden installations on Mars, in the moons of Jupiter, and even in the sun's corona. The entire solar system is one big defensive network." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. "And we never knew about it?" "It seems like the systems were designed to remain hidden until they were needed," Maria said. The Zephyrian intrusion triggered an automatic response. On the other side of the galaxy, the Galactic Council was in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species sat in the great circular chamber, their voices raised in panic and confusion. "The humans are awakening," declared Ambassador Trelvac of the Crystalline Confederation. His body, made of living crystal, flashed with colors that showed his fear. "The beacon signals are coming from all over their space. The old protocols are activating." High Counselor Meredith, leader of the council, tried to maintain order. She was one of the few beings old enough to remember the stories her grandmother had told her about the time before the Great Sleep. "We must remain calm. The humans chose to sleep. Perhaps they can be convinced to sleep again." Sleep? General Vextar's image appeared on the communication screen. He was transmitting from his flagship, which was now racing toward the Sol system. "With a fleet of 200 ships. The humans are primitive. These awakenings you speak of are probably just their defense systems responding to my scout ship. We can handle primitive humans." The entire council chamber fell silent. Even the youngest members knew that General Vextar had just made a terrible mistake. "General," Meredith said slowly, "you must turn your fleet around immediately. The humans are not what they seem." But Vextar had already cut the communication. His fleet was already halfway to the Sol system. and he was convinced that he could crush any resistance the humans might offer. Back on Earth, Elena Rodriguez felt the moment when Vexter's fleet entered the outer detection range. The network of awakened humans around the world suddenly became aware of the approaching threat. "Ben," she said quietly, "it's starting. They're coming in force." Ben nodded, his eyes now glowing brighter. "The deep systems are responding. I can feel installations waking up all over the planet. And not just on Earth." Elena closed her eyes and reached out with her enhanced senses. She could feel human minds awakening on Mars, on the Moon, in the asteroid belt, and in places she hadn't even known humans had ever been. The network was vast, much larger than she had imagined. "How many of us are there?" she asked. "More than anyone suspected," Ben replied. "The Guardians didn't just go to sleep. They spread out across the galaxy and waited, and now they're all waking up." High above Earth, in an orbital platform that had been hidden behind a cloaking field. For 3 centuries, Admiral Patricia Stone opened her eyes for the first time in 300 years. Around her, her crew was also awakening from their long sleep. "Status report," she said, her voice clear and strong despite the centuries of sleep. "All systems operational, Admiral," replied her first officer, Commander Rick Davis. Dr. Elena Rodriguez felt the change the moment it began. The meteorite fragments on her desk weren't just glowing anymore. They were singing, a low, harmonic sound that seemed to come from inside her own mind. "Ben, are you hearing this?" she asked, but when she turned around, Ben Carter was no longer the same person she had worked with for 3 years. Ben's eyes now glowed with bright blue light, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of centuries. "It's not just us, Elena. The network is activating across the entire galaxy. Every human settlement, every colony, every deep space station that we thought was lost." Elena felt knowledge flooding into her mind. Images of vast shipyards hidden in the asteroid belt, massive installations buried under Mars, weapons platforms disguised as moons around Jupiter. But most shocking of all were the memories of humans who had been awake all along, quietly maintaining these systems while the rest of humanity slept. "How is this possible?" Elena whispered. "We were never really asleep," Ben replied. "Some of you has stayed awake to watch and wait. They've been preparing for this day for 300 years. Meanwhile, Captain Jake Morrison and his crew were witnessing something impossible. The space around them filled with light as enormous structures began to materialize. Ships that dwarfed entire space stations emerged from what looked like empty space. Where were they hiding? Lisa Chang asked, her voice filled with awe. Dr. Amy Foster was working frantically at her translation computer. According to these precursor records, they weren't hiding. They were existing in what the records call fold space, a dimension that exists alongside our own. Pete Jackson looked up from his engine controls. "Captain, our ship is being pulled toward one of those big vessels, but the engines aren't fighting it. It's like they want to go." Jake watched as his ship was gently guided into a docking bay that was larger than most space stations. As they landed, he could see humans in advanced uniforms waiting for them. These weren't the primitive humans that the galaxy thought they knew. These people moved with purpose and confidence, and their technology was clearly far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations possessed. On Earth, the awakening was spreading faster than anyone had expected. In downtown Los Angeles, police officer Chris Johnson was responding to reports of strange lights when his mind suddenly expanded. He could see the entire city laid out before him like a tactical map. Every street, every building, every person was visible to his enhanced perception. "Control, this is Johnson," he spoke into his radio. "I'm seeing things, big things. There are installations under the city. How did we never know about them?" The voice that answered him wasn't his usual dispatcher. "Officer Johnson, this is Command Authority 7. Report to grid reference Alpha 77 for immediate briefing. Your genetic markers indicate Guardian class potential. Chris had no idea what that meant, but something inside him understood that he needed to go. In the Pacific Ocean, marine biologist Dr. Susan Taylor was conducting research on a deep-sea platform when the ocean itself seemed to come alive. Massive structures rose from the ocean floor, breaking the surface for the first time in centuries. But these weren't ruins. They were fully operational installations, humming with power and surrounded by defensive systems that made current military technology look like toys. "My God," Susan whispered as she watched a structure the size of a city emerge from the depths. "How long have these been down there?" A voice spoke directly into her mind, clear and calm. "Dr. Taylor, you have been selected for integration with the Deep Ocean Command Network. Please do not be alarmed. The process will enhance your abilities to communicate with both human and non-human intelligence systems." Before Susan could protest, she felt her consciousness expanding. Suddenly, she was aware of every living thing in the ocean, every current, every underwater installation. She was part of a vast network that spanned the entire planet. In Detroit, factory worker Lise Rodriguez was trying to fix a broken machine when his hands began to glow. He touched the metal, and instead of feeling cold steel, he felt the atomic structure of the material. Without thinking, he began to reshape it, molding the metal like clay until the machine was not just fixed, but improved beyond its original design. "What's happening to me?" Louise asked, staring at his glowing hands. His supervisor, Mary Thompson, walked over and put a hand on his shoulder. Her eyes were glowing too. "You're becoming what you were always meant to be, Louise. We all are." "General." Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, staring at the tactical display in disbelief. His fleet of 200 ships, the largest force the Zephyrian Empire had ever assembled, was being surrounded by human vessels that shouldn't exist. "How many ships are we detecting?" He asked his tactical officer. "Sir, the count keeps changing. Ships keep appearing out of nowhere. Current estimate is over 3,000 vessels, and more are arriving every minute." Vextar felt his confidence cracking. "That's impossible. Our intelligence reports said the humans have maybe 50 ships in their entire fleet." "Sir," his communication officer interrupted. "We're receiving a transmission from the human fleet. They want to talk." The main screen flickered, and a human woman appeared. She wore a uniform that looked both military and elegant, with insignia that meant nothing to Zephyrian eyes, but somehow conveyed great authority. "I am Admiral Patricia Stone of the Human Deep Fleet," the woman said. Her voice was calm but carried an undertone of power that made Vextar's crew step back from their stations. "General Vextar, you have violated the Soul Sanctuary and threatened the worlds under our protection. Surrender now, and your crews will be treated with dignity." Vextar found his voice. "Surrender? You're outnumbered. One have 200 ships." "Admiral." Stone smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "General, you have 200 ships. We have been preparing for this moment for 3 centuries. Would you like to see our full strength?" The space around Vextar's fleet suddenly filled with light. Ships appeared everywhere, not just around his fleet, but stretching as far as his sensors could detect. They came in sizes from small fighters to massive vessels that looked like they could carry entire cities. And behind them all, something even larger was emerging from fold space. "My God," whispered Vextar's tactical officer. "Sir, that's not a ship. That's a space station. No, it's bigger than that. It's the size of a moon." Admiral Stone's voice came through the communication system again. "That is Deep Base 1, General. One of 17 such installations. Each one carries enough firepower to sterilize a galaxy. We built them to protect life, not destroy it, but we will use them if we must." Vextar looked around at his crew. The fear in their eyes told him everything he needed to know. They were completely outmatched, But his pride wouldn't let him surrender. "You're bluffing. No one has that kind of power." "Very well," Admiral Stone said. "Let me show you what 3 centuries of preparation looks like." One of the smaller human ships, no bigger than a Zephyrian destroyer, moved toward an asteroid that was floating nearby. A beam of energy shot out from the ship, and the asteroid simply ceased to exist. Not destroyed, not blown apart, but converted into pure energy and absorbed by the ship. That asteroid was solid iron and nickel, General. Our ship just turned it into fuel. Now imagine what that same technology could do to your fleet. For the first time in his military career, General Vextar felt true fear. These weren't the primitive humans he had expected to find. These were beings with technology so advanced that his entire civilization looked like children playing with toys. "What do you want?" he asked quietly. "We want peace, General. We always have. But if you force us to choose between peace and the protection of innocent life, we will choose protection every time." On Earth, Colonel Alex Thompson was coordinating with military leaders around the world, but the conversations were unlike anything in military history. The people he was talking to weren't just military officers anymore. They were part of something larger, a network of enhanced humans who could think and plan on a scale that spanned star systems. "Sir," reported Maria Santos, "we're getting status. Reports from installations we didn't even know existed. Mars Base Alpha isn't just a mining operation. It's a full military command center with a fleet of ships that have been in storage for centuries. Europa Station is coming online too," added Lieutenant Dan Walsh. "It's not a research station. It's a quantum communication hub that connects to every human settlement in the galaxy." Alex felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. How many people knew about this? According to the data we're receiving, about 1% of the human population has been maintaining these systems, while the rest of us lived normal lives. They've been waiting for the awakening signal for 300 years. The awakening signal. Alex now understood what that meant. Humanity hadn't been sleeping. They had been waiting. Waiting for a threat large enough to require their attention. And General Vextar had just provided that threat dot in the Galactic Council. Chambers, panic was spreading like a disease. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting over each other, trying to understand what was happening. "The humans have activated installations on over 40 worlds," screamed Ambassador Trelvac. "Worlds that we thought were empty. They've been there all along, watching us." All across the galaxy, ancient machines began to hum with life. On the crystalline homeworld of Veltara, massive crystal formations that had stood for thousands of years suddenly began to glow. These weren't natural crystals. They were memory banks built long ago in partnership with human engineers. Ambassador Trelvac stood before the awakening crystals, his own crystalline body reflecting their light. As the eldest of his people, he had always wondered about the strange formations that dotted their world. Now as data flowed from the crystals into his mind, he finally understood. "By the ancient lights," he whispered, "we were never alone. They were always watching." The crystals showed him images from his people's past. Zephyrian raiders attacking crystal mining ships. Veltaran cities burning under orbital bombardment. And then, ships appearing from nowhere. Human ships with crews that moved like they owned the stars themselves. The raiders had fled and the humans had helped rebuild what was destroyed. But that wasn't the most shocking part. The humans had done this quietly, without asking for thanks or payment. When the crisis was over, they had simply vanished, leaving behind only the memory crystals to record what had happened. Meanwhile, on the Zephyrian homeworld, General Vextar's worst nightmare was coming true. Deep in the Imperial archives, sealed, vaults that required the authorization of 3 high generals were opening on their own. Documents that had been classified for over 1,000 years were suddenly available for anyone to read. High General Mordick, the most senior military officer in the Empire, stood in the archive chamber reading files that made his hands shake. "This is impossible," he muttered. "Our greatest victories. They were all lies." The files told a different story than the one every Zephyrian child learned in school. The Battle of Krendal, where Zephyrian forces had supposedly defeated a fleet of space pirates through superior tactics, had actually been won when mysterious ships had appeared and disabled the pirate vessels without firing a shot. The Great Expansion, when Zephyrian colonies had spread across their local star cluster, had only been possible because something had been clearing dangerous space anomalies and hostile alien species from their path. That something had been humans. "Get me a communication link to the Sol system," Mordick ordered. "I need to speak with whoever is in charge of their military." Dr. Amy Foster had never seen anything like the precursor archive that Captain Jake Morrison's team had discovered. But now, connected to the awakening human network, she could read the ancient records as easily as if they had been written in her native language. "Jake, you need to see this," she called to the captain. They were now aboard Admiral Stone's flagship, Deep Base One, in a vast library that seemed to stretch for kilometers in every direction. Jake walked over to where Amy was standing in front of a holographic display. The images showed the galaxy as it had been thousands of years ago, but it looked completely different from the galaxy they knew today. "What am I looking at?" Jake asked. "The galaxy before the Great Sleep," Amy replied. "Jake, do you see those dark areas? Those are regions where entire civilizations were destroyed by something called the Void Hunters. They were creatures from outside our galaxy that fed on intelligent life." Jake studied the display. "And the humans stopped them?" "Not just stopped them. The humans built a barrier around the entire galaxy to keep them out. But maintaining that barrier required so much energy and attention that human civilization couldn't grow normally. So they made a choice." Amy manipulated the display, showing the galaxy changing over time. They went to sleep. They reduced their civilization to a fraction of its former size and built automated systems to maintain the barrier, while other species had time to develop. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "And now they're waking up because ... because something broke the barrier," Amy finished. "The Void Hunters are coming back." On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez was experiencing visions that terrified her. The awakening process had connected her not just to the human network, but to monitoring systems that watched the empty space between galaxies. And that space wasn't empty anymore. "Ben," she called out, but her voice was shaking. "The deep space monitors are detecting movement in the void, lots of movement." Ben Carter, his eyes now glowing with constant blue light, was already aware of what she had seen. The Watchers have been tracking them for the past 50 years. The Void Hunters found a way around the barrier. They're still months away, but they're coming. Elena looked at the data flowing through her enhanced mind. Ships, if they could be called ships, were moving through the void between galaxies. They were massive, organic-looking things that seemed to absorb light itself, and there were thousands of them. "How long do we have?" Elena asked. "Based on their current speed, maybe 8 months before they reach the outer edge of our galaxy." "But Elena, that's not the worst part." Elena felt her heart sink. What's worse than an invasion of galaxy-eating monsters? They're not just coming here. The monitoring network is detecting similar movements towards 17 other galaxies. This isn't just an invasion, it's a harvest. They're planning to consume everything. General Vextar sat in the detention cell aboard Admiral Stone's flagship, but he wasn't being treated like a prisoner. The cell was comfortable, with all the food and entertainment he could want. But more importantly, he was being educated. Human. Officers had been visiting him every day, showing him historical records and explaining the truth about galactic history. At first, he had refused to believe them. but the evidence was overwhelming. "I don't understand," Vextar said to Commander Rick Davis, Admiral Stone's first officer, during one of their daily conversations. "If humans were so powerful, why did you let us believe we were the dominant species in the galaxy?" Commander Davis smiled sadly. "Because you needed to believe it. All of the younger species did. How could you grow and develop if you always had someone more powerful watching over you? It would be like children never learning to walk because their parents always carried them." Vextar thought about this, but we made mistakes. We fought wars. People died. Yes, they did, and every death was recorded. Every mistake was noted. And when we could, we helped without you knowing, but we couldn't save everyone. If we had, you would never have learned the consequences of your actions. Vextar felt a weight settling on his shoulders. "So when I ordered the attack on the Sol system, you proved that the galaxy still isn't ready to protect itself. The Void Hunters are coming, General. Your attack was just the trigger that woke us up to deal with a much bigger threat." On the bridge of Deep Base 1, Admiral Stone was coordinating with human commanders across the galaxy. The awakening had revealed a network that was vast beyond imagination. Every major galaxy had human outposts. Every important star system had monitoring stations. Even the galactic core, where no normal ship could survive, had human installations that had been watching and waiting for centuries. Status report. Admiral Stone requested. Captain Jake Morrison, who had been given temporary command duties, consulted his display. All major installations are now online. The deep space fleets are emerging from Fold Space Storage. Total human military assets now exceed 5 million vessels of various classes. And the other species? The Galactic Council has called an emergency session. They want to negotiate. The Crystalline Confederation is offering full support. The Zephyrian Empire is confused but willing to listen. Admiral Stone nodded. And the younger species? Lisa Chang, who had been promoted to communications officer, spoke up. "The species that achieved space travel in the last 1,000 years are having a hard time accepting the truth. Some of them think this is all an elaborate hoax. They'll understand when the Void Hunters arrive," Admiral Stone said grimly. "What about our internal preparations?" Pete Jackson, now serving as chief engineer for the entire Sol system, reported from his station. "The planetary defense grids are operating at full capacity. The barrier generators are being brought out of storage. But Admiral, even with all our technology, we can't rebuild the galactic barrier in 8 months. Admiral Stone knew he was right. The original barrier had taken centuries to build and required resources from across the entire galaxy. Then we'll have to try something else. We'll have to teach the galaxy how to fight." In the Galactic Council chambers, High Counselor Meredith was trying to maintain order as representatives from hundreds of species argued about what to do. The revelation that humans had been watching over them for millennia had shattered everything. They thought they knew about galactic politics. "The humans are requesting permission to address the council," announced the communications officer. "Permission granted," Meredith said quickly. Anything was better than the chaos that was currently filling the chamber. The main display activated, showing Admiral Stone standing on the bridge of her flagship. Behind her, the massive viewing screen showed the human fleet in all its glory. "Honorable representatives," Admiral Stone began, "I know you have questions. I know our awakening has been disturbing. But we don't have time for lengthy explanations. The galaxy is under threat from an enemy that has destroyed entire galactic clusters. We need to work together if we're going to survive." Ambassador Trelvok spoke first. 6 months had passed since the Great Awakening, and the galaxy was no longer the same place. On Earth, Dr. Elena Rodriguez stood in what had once been her small laboratory in Antarctica. Now it was the central command center for the Galactic Defense Network. A room filled with holographic displays showing the positions of millions of ships across hundreds of star systems. "Status report on the outer barrier construction," Elena requested, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had become far more than a simple scientist. Ben Carter, now serving as her deputy commander, consulted the displays floating in front of him. "The Crystalline Confederation has completed their section ahead of schedule. Their crystal technology integrates perfectly with our barrier generators. The Zephyrian Empire has provided 3 million ships for the defense fleet, and they're still building more." Elena nodded with satisfaction. The cooperation between species had been remarkable, but it had taken the very real threat of galactic extinction to achieve it. The Void Hunters were still 2 months away, but their approach had united the galaxy in a way that nothing else could have. "What about the younger species?" Elena asked. "The species that achieved space travel in the last few centuries are contributing what they can. They may not have advanced weapons, but they have fresh ideas and perspectives that our older strategies needed." Captain Jake Morrison was no longer commanding a simple exploration ship. He now led a joint task force that included vessels from 17 different species, all working together to test new weapons against Void Hunter technology. His ship, still called the New Horizon, had been upgraded with technology that made it capable of traveling between star systems in minutes rather than months. "Lisa, are you getting clear readings on the test target?" Jake asked his navigator, Lisa Chang, now enhanced with the same abilities that had awakened in humans across the galaxy, could interface directly with the ship's sensors. "Target acquired, Captain. It's a perfect replica of Void Hunter bioship. Design based on the data from our deep space monitors." The test target was massive, a twisted organic shape that seemed to absorb light. It was only a simulation created by combining human technology with crystalline memory systems, but it felt real enough to make Jake's crew nervous. "Pete, are the new weapons ready?" Jake called to his engineer. Pete Jackson grinned from his station. "The quantum disruptor cannons are charged and ready. These babies use technology that combines human barrier science with Zephyrian plasma technology. If this doesn't work on the Void Hunters, nothing will." Jake gave the order to fire. Beams of pure energy, tinged with colors that didn't exist in normal space, struck the test target. Instead of simply destroying it, the beams seemed to unravel the target's very existence, breaking it down into component atoms and then dispersing those atoms harmlessly into space. "Direct hit," Lisa reported. "The target has been completely neutralized with no dangerous residue." Jake smiled for the first time in months. They might actually have a chance. On the other side of the galaxy, General Vextar was no longer a prisoner. Admiral Stone had offered him a choice: face military tribunal for his attack on the Sol system, or help coordinate the defense of his own people. The choice had been easy. "Admiral Stone," Vextar reported over the communication link, "the Zephyrian defense fleets are in position along the galactic rim. We have integrated human barrier technology with our ship's defensive systems. When the Void Hunters arrive, they'll find us ready." Admiral Stone's image on the communication screen nodded approvingly. "How are your people adapting to working with human commanders?" Vextar thought about the question. 6 months ago, the idea of Zephyrians taking orders from humans would have been unthinkable. Now his people competed for the honor of serving under human officers who had been fighting galactic threats for thousands of years. "Better than I expected, Admiral." Once they understood what was at stake, pride became less important than survival. Meanwhile, in the deep reaches of space, Admiral Patricia Stone stood on the bridge of the newly constructed Unity Station. This massive structure, built in just 4 months through the combined efforts of dozens of species, served as the command center for the entire galactic defense network. "Status of the barrier construction?" Admiral Stone asked. Commander Rick Davis consulted his displays. 87% complete. The final section should be finished within the next 3 weeks, well before the Void Hunters arrive. The new barrier was different from the one that had protected the galaxy for millennia. Instead of being maintained by humans alone, it incorporated technology and energy from every species in the galaxy. Crystalline memory systems provided processing power. Zephyrian plasma generators supplied raw energy. Younger species contributed innovative ideas that improved efficiency. It was truly a galactic effort. And our mobile defenses? Admiral Stone continued. The joint fleets are positioned at strategic points throughout the galaxy. Each fleet combines ships from multiple species, commanded by officers trained in unified tactics. If any Void Hunters break through the barrier, they'll face coordinated resistance on a scale never before achieved. Dr. Amy Foster had become more than just a translator. Working with awakened AIs and enhanced humans, she had helped develop a new form of communication that allowed instant coordination between all species in the galaxy. Standing in the communication center of Unity Station, she monitored the thoughts and feelings of millions of beings working together for a common goal. Admiral, Amy reported, morale across the galaxy remains high. The species that were initially skeptical of human leadership have seen the deep space monitoring data. They understand that this threat is real. Admiral Stone was pleased but not surprised. The Void Hunters had a way of making petty differences seem unimportant. When facing extinction, species tended to cooperate. Any word from the Deep Space Scouts? Admiral Stone asked. Amy's expression grew serious. The advanced scout ships report that the Void Hunters have consumed 3 more galaxies during their approach. They're not just traveling toward us. They're feeding along the way, growing stronger. This was troubling news, but not unexpected. The Void Hunters had been consuming galaxies for millions of years. They were efficient predators who left nothing behind but empty space. On Earth, ordinary humans who had been awakened were adapting to their new roles in ways that surprised everyone. Tony Richards, the construction worker who could interface with electronic systems, was now helping to coordinate the construction of planetary defense grids across hundreds of worlds. Helen Brooks, the nurse who had discovered healing abilities, was working with alien medical specialists to develop treatments for injuries that the coming battle might cause. Her abilities had grown to the point where she could heal not just humans, but beings from dozens of different species. Gary Coleman, the teacher who could understand any language, was helping to train the children of multiple species in the unified communication protocols that would be essential during the battle. His students included young Zephyrians, crystalline offspring, and representatives from species that had never worked together before. The day of the Void Hunters' arrival came sooner than expected. Deep space monitors detected the massive fleet emerging from the void between galaxies, and the sight was more terrifying than anyone had imagined. "My God," whispered General Vextar as he watched the sensor readings. "How many of them are there?" Admiral Stone studied the data flowing in from the monitoring stations. Conservative estimate puts their numbers at over 50,000 vessels. Each one is the size of a small moon. But the galaxy was ready. The new barrier came online as the Void Hunters approached, a wall of energy that stretched across the entire galactic rim. Unlike the old barrier, which had been designed to keep threats out, this new barrier was designed to channel the Void Hunters into specific areas where the combined fleets could engage them. "All units, this is Admiral Stone," she announced on the galaxy-wide communication network. "The enemy has arrived. Remember your training. Trust your allies. And fight for everything we've built together." The battle was unlike anything in galactic history. Void Hunter bioships, massive organic creatures that fed on life energy, crashed against the barrier like waves against a shore. But this shore was defended by millions of ships from hundreds of species, all working with perfect coordination. Captain Jake Morrison led his task force. against a group of void hunters that had broken through the barrier's outer layer. Fire quantum disruptors. He ordered. The combined weapons of human, Zephyrian, and crystalline ships struck the enemy vessels, and the results were spectacular. The void hunters, which had seemed invincible, were torn apart by weapons that attacked. Their very existence, it's working, Lisa Chang reported. The quantum disruptors are more effective than we hoped. Across the galaxy, similar scenes played out as the combined fleets proved that cooperation could overcome even the most terrible threats. The void hunters, accustomed to facing divided, primitive species, found themselves confronting a unified galaxy with technology and tactics they couldn't counter. The battle lasted for 3 days. When it was over, the void hunter fleet had been completely destroyed. More importantly, the galaxy had proven that it could work together to face any threat.